Hello and welcome to this video in the Notion tutorial series. Today I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about Notion's databases. Databases are one of the most powerful features, and if you know how to use them right, it will level up your skills in Notion like crazy. As you can see, this is a long video. There are a lot of features to talk about, a lot of tips and tricks to know, but don't worry, we'll cover them all. Down below in the description you see the timestamp, so feel free to jump ahead, jump to a specific section, skip parts that don't feel relevant, but again, if you watch everything from the beginning to the end, I promise you'll know everything you'll ever need to know about databases. Now, let's jump right in.
So, databases in Notion. Before we talk about all the cool things that you can do with them, let's first take a second to figure out what actually is a database. And put very simply, a database is a store of data. On the left side, you see the look of a typical Notion database. And you can see in this one, the type of data that we store are superheroes. And not only can we have like the name of our superhero, but we can add additional information in additional properties. So I can add here the universe in this case and the coolness factor, and I could add further information to each of my entries. Now, a database at first glance looks very, very similar to a spreadsheet that you're probably more familiar with. So on the right side, we have a spreadsheet, we have Excel, and we have the exact same type of information, and the layout looks pretty much the same. But databases and spreadsheets are two very different things. And we don't need to dive too much into the details. So I'm just going to try to focus on the few practical implications that you need to know. In a database, as I said already, what you basically do is you store one key part of information, in this case the name of a superhero, and then you add context to them, like additional metadata, additional information of some sort. Whereas in a spreadsheet, you fill out cells and you can interact with pretty much any cell from everywhere, right? We know that if we want to sum now the coolness factors of our heroes, we could simply type sum, mark these cell values, and then we see that our collective value of coolness for all superheroes is 30. You can do that in a spreadsheet, you can't do that in a database. In a database, there's in a Notion database, there's no way to manipulate individual or like to do something on an individual cell basis. So whereas here you have like cell C2, right, and you could do something with that. You could say here, okay, give me the value of C2. There's no way to create like a new row here and say, okay, please give me the value of universe Wonder Woman or something like that. There's also no way to create like a freestanding cell, right? All our cells here have to always be connected within a row, and that means connected to a main entry. And one of the results of this is that whereas in Excel I can simply say, okay, please sum this up, in Notion there's no easy way to do this. Now, Notion has this thing built in here at the bottom where you can click on calculate, right? And now I could count the sum of them, but that only works for the whole database, whereas in a spreadsheet, as you know, I could also just do, okay, just give me the sum of these two. Again, you can't do this in a database. So at first glance, a database feels a bit limited compared to a spreadsheet, and in some ways it is, but it's just like a crucial information that these two things are two separate concepts. So again, a database is something where we have one key value, usually the first one, and then we just add other pairings of informations, and then they are always linked to it, right? So if I move Wonder Woman around here to the bottom, we see that the assigned values move with her. So that's the same behavior as if in Excel you would turn this into a table, right? And then you also have this connection here, but by default in a spreadsheet, these cells are not linked with each other, right? Like if I would move Spider-Man to the bottom, Spider-Man would move without Marvel and so on. So that's the very quick introduction about databases and the key difference to spreadsheets. Now let's look at what we can actually do with them. So how do we actually create a database in Notion? There are basically two ways to do this. The first one is that whenever you create a page in your workspace, so for example, if I go here on my sidebar, I hover there and I get this plus icon to add a page. Whenever I create a page in my Notion workspace, I get the option to either create a normal page or to create a database. I've went over these in a bit more detail with the pages in the previous video. That's linked in the description, so check that one out if you're unsure about it. But basically, you always can pick a normal page with the normal blocks or a database. So in this case, we're going with a database, and it doesn't really matter which of these options you choose. They're all interchangeable. We can all change that later. So let's just pick the first one. And then what Notion nowadays will do is they will ask you, do you want to connect like an existing database, or should this become a new one? So if you already created databases in your Notion workspace, you'll see a few options. But what we want to do is we want to create a new database. And then we get this familiar look. We can give our database a name, our first database, and everything is great. One thing that you'll notice is that now that we have a database, there are now no other blocks on that page. On all the other Notion pages that we had so far, so let's go here for example, we had the option to press enter a few times. We have a lot of lines, right? We can add all sorts of blocks. Again, if you don't know what to do on a Notion page, watch the previous video where we go about all these things in detail. But we have a lot of options. However, with a database, we don't have any options. All we get is this database table. We can add a description, so we could get a little bit of text here, but that's about it. There's no way to add a different sort of block. We can style it, right? We have our usual formatting, but for example, if we click on the turn into option, which usually gives us, turn into heading, turn into callout, we see there are no options to do this. And there's also no way to add anything below it. So that's a full page database. The second way to add a database to our workspace is if we go on any sort of page. Let's just create a normal page. Again, you see now we can press enter. We have a lot of space here. If we type / and database, it gives us two options: a database inline and a database full page. Now, clicking on database full page will do exactly the same thing as we did before with creating a page. Remember? Last time we were clicking here on the plus icon. I could also now type / and do a page, and I get these options. Now, let's delete this. If I type / database and I pick the full page option, pretty much the same thing happens. We don't get asked whether we want to connect an existing database source. Instead, we jump directly into like a fresh one, but we also end up with what is a full page database. Also, you notice that with a database, a full page database, you always use the full width of the page. There's no way, as with a normal Notion page, to just have it take up the center. Okay, so now we've created here another full page database. But what was that other option? If we type / database again, we see the inline option. And if I click on it, it gives me a database inside my page. Looks exactly the same, right? But now all of a sudden, I can add a heading above, right? Some title. I can add a callout below. I have all my blocks on the page, and the database is just one block of many. I can move it around, and so on and so on. So is there actually a difference between the inline database and a full page database? In reality, no. You can at any point in time just turn an inline database into a full page one. And the other way around as well, like this was the full page one, we can just click on here and turn it into inline. So it's pretty much interchangeable, and the main difference is just for you, how do you look at it, right? Do you have the database take up all the space of your page, or do you have things around it? So at first glance, it might seem that there's not really a reason to create a full page database, because it just limits your option, right? You could just click here, click on full width, and now you have also the database take up the whole space of the page. But now you can add information above it, you can add information below it. So it seems like that the inline version is just more flexible. However, in terms of best practices when it comes to building out your Notion workspace, I would say that most of the time I would start by creating a full page database. And to talk about that, I want to circle back to a concept that we had in a previous video, and that was how to organize your Notion workspace. You might remember that I told you that when you build out your Notion workspace, you should not just do what I did and click on the plus button here to create pages on this first level, right? Or to go into your like a normal page, like the third level page, for example, and then just like start creating a second hierarchies inside those and trying to replicate like this folder structure that you're used to, because that way it will be very, very hard to find things later. Instead, what I recommended to do is that you create on the first level, on this like main level of your Notion workspace, that you create core databases that store all the other pages that you have. So in our workspace so far, all we did was to create one pages and document database and to put all the pages that we have inside here. And that's what I would say is the main purpose for these full page databases. It's to, for every sort of big data points, so your pages, your tasks, your projects, maybe things that you read, so like all these big categories, go ahead and create a full page database on the main level and use that to sort all your information. It will be much, much easier. And then we're going to use something that's called a linked view to database that I'm going to talk about later in this video to get that information out of this main page into the normal page where we can add information to it. So the one reason to have this distinction between the full page and the inline one and to use the full page as the base layer is the general organization one. And the other one is to make sure that you don't accidentally delete something. Again, we look at linked databases later, but basically you can get the information from a database and see it in a bunch of different ways. And there's always the risk that if you don't know, okay, which is the original one and which one is just a view, that you delete the original one and then that it's gone. But if you make sure that your original version of a database is always a full page one, you don't accidentally delete it, because whenever you see a full page thing, you know, oh, this is the main source. And whenever you see something inside a different page, you know, okay, this is just like a copy or a version of it and I can delete it without any problems. So that's why I would say when you create databases, generally start out with a full page and then use the inline only to look at it later. Great. That was already a lot of theory, but now we're ready to dive into something a bit more practical. So let's create actually an inline database, just because it will be a bit easier for the demonstration purposes. And let's look at the general UI of it. So we have an option to name our database name. Then we have above it this little icon that is a view. We're going to talk about them in a second, and the option to create new views. As always with every Notion block, we have the 6 dots appear here, which means that we can turn this into something else and we can move it around by dragging and dropping it. We have then the main area of our database, and we have a bunch of options on the side. So we can do filtering, sorting, we can search for something, we can open it as a full page. We get the options that just apply to this database. So remember, the 3 dots at the top of a page give you the page-wide settings, and the 3 dots on a database give you the settings that apply only to this specific database. And then you have this new button. You have another new button down here, and they do both exactly the same. They just add a new record. So if I click on here, we get a new line. And remember from the very beginning, the way databases work is that we have one key part of information, the first row, and then we have a bunch of additional information that we can add if we want to. So we have maybe we have a fruit, so we have like apples, we have bananas, we have a pear, and we might have, what else? Some strawberries. So these are our key information points, and then we can add metadata to them. So we could say, okay, this is now something, apples are round, bananas are long, something like that. Add additional information. We're going to talk about what exactly we can add in a second, but just for you to remember, key information, additional information that's always linked to our main part of information. And then we have our rows and our columns. Columns in Notion are called properties. And we're going to look at them in details in a moment. But first, the last thing to talk about is that at the end of your fields in the last part of the UI of a database is this calculate field that will appear if you hover over a row, and through that you get like a bunch of options to get sort of like these soft calculations, but it's fairly limited still compared to what you're used to from a spreadsheet. So let's talk about all sort of information that you can add to a database, aka your properties. When you create a database, you always get the main row, remember the key point of information, and then you get always one of these tags fields. That's just by default. We can simply remove it. To delete a property, we can right-click it and then click on delete property. If you right-click, you also see a bunch of other options. For example, I could rename this to shapes. Right? That's what we what we did with it. We had shapes here. We can change the type. We're going to talk about all these types in a second. I can edit it. If I click on here, it just pulls up a slightly more expansive menu on the side. And I can apply a bunch of other styling options that we're going to cover in a moment. But for now, we just want to delete this. Delete. Okay, so to add a new property, all we have to do is click on the plus button, or to go on the three dots here and go to properties. Again, we're going to talk about all these options in a second, so for now, let's just click on the plus one. And what it will do is it will create this new property, and it will give us on the right side the option menu for this sort of property. By default, it gives us the simplest type of property, a text property. So let's just call this text, or in our case, like maybe a comment for our task. And now, very self-explanatory, we can simply type some stuff in here. That's all, nothing fancy. It's simply a text field. We can actually mark the text and have our usual styling options. So we can create a link here, we can do it bold, something like that. We can add the text color, change the text color, all things that are not available actually for the first one, even though this is also just text, right? And we can highlight it. There's no way to unbold this or to make it underline. Whereas here you get these formatting options. I can bold it, I can make it turn the color to like an orange background, something like that. Actually, it's not to that background because that looks like a different feature. So we're going back to the default background, but we want the blue color. Okay, so that's a text property. Let's hit the plus button again and let's look at the next one. Next one is number, and with numbers, again, it's fairly straightforward. So maybe for what would be something for a tag, for like a task, maybe it could be difficulty, would make sense to use a number for in a task database. And we can see now that we can change the number format. So for all types of sort of numbers, similar to the way you format an Excel cell, you could do that here. So I just say like, okay, this is maybe a 10, this is a 5, this is a 8, and calling mark is a 2. Now, to get back to the options, I can right-click difficulty and say, oops, edit property. Then it pulls up these informations again. Or in case of the number field, to change the format of a number, if I hover over this, you see here, nothing happens, and here I get this number. So if I just want to type the way it's displayed, I could do that directly here. But I actually want to show you something else, and that's a very recent feature release in Notion, and that is that you now can choose to display any number property also as either a bar or a ring. So I can say, okay, I would like the difficulty to show as a bar, like that's like easier for me to visualize. So I click on here, and now what it does, it gives me a bunch of additional options. I can pick the color, right, like it's difficulty, so let's pick the red color. I can choose to divide by 100, right, if I want to have a percentile, but I actually don't want to, so I just put this to 1. Although actually that then just shows a full bar for everything, so let's divide by 10. Yep, that looks better. So if the difficulty is like on a scale from 1 to 10, I would need to divide by 10. If it's 1 to 100, by 100. If it's just like 0 to 1, divide by 1, and so on. And then I can choose to display the number or not display the number. Let's keep it on. for now, and now I have like this more visual representation of how difficult my task is. And of course, I could, instead of getting the bar, I could also have this as a ring, although for this is probably better for progress, and the bar is probably better for difficulty. Great. So that's the second type of property, numbers. Now let's go through the next one, and that's the select property. And select properties are basically tags. So let's use this here again. And what would we need a tag for? Maybe this could be useful for maybe is it to separate private or professional tasks? So let's just do maybe area as the name. And what it gives me here as the option now is to add options. So with a select, we can now determine, okay, what are the things that we can select from? So I click on plus and I say, okay, I have professional tasks and then I have private tasks. So this is actually like so private and professional. So now I could click here and type also professional, or alternatively, I can just go in here, click in here, and I can either apply something, or I can just type professional, and I get the option to create another tag. So there are two ways to create these entries for select, either by just typing in here, or by going to the options and adding them here. And that's why I removed the highlight from the background here, because the tags in the database always get a background. You can change it. If you click here on the three dots, you can change the color, and you can also, which is very useful, rename it. So if you've already given, like, let's paint our room, that's actually private, this is professional, and call mom is private again. And if we realize private is the wrong name, we don't need to reapply the tags everywhere. We can just say, okay, private, that's like, should better be personal, and we'll change it everywhere, and we don't need to reapply it. And the thing about the select is that it can only be one thing. So if I change it to professional, it's now professional. If it's personal, it's personal. You can't apply several tags. To do that, you need the next sort of property, and that's a multi-select. So let's call this actually tags, and go for the next option, our multi-select. And you see we have the exact same option menu here. We can add our options, or we can directly type in there. And let's just add a few. Maybe tags are for some sort of organizing. Maybe it's the things that we need for it. So here we need maybe, do we need our laptop? No, maybe it's like, okay, it's high energy or low energy, maybe that. And we could say, okay, do we need our, let's do laptop, or do we need to be at the office or at home? So whenever you have like a bunch of things that you might want to assign the usual tagging, you can do that here. And now you can do several things. So I can say, okay, taxes, that's like a high energy thing, and I need to do it at home. My paper, that's also high energy, and I need to do it at the office. Call mom, for that I actually need my phone, but I can do it everywhere. And paid room, I need to do that at home. So if we want to apply several sorts of information, we best use this multi-select. Moving on, the next property type is a status. And usually that's also like a fairly new update. What you would usually do, or what you would have done before, if you want to say, okay, a task is done or not done, we would say, okay, let's call this status, and let's actually get the select one for now. And we just give it, okay, to do, doing, and done as the options. So this is how you would have done like this status selection in Notion before, but now we actually have a dedicated status property. And the dedicated status property is a bit special. So let's open the options. The first thing that we see is that by default, Notion will, if you pick status property, will give you 3 categories for a status: to do, in progress, and complete. And then you have the option to add sub-labels to these categories. So you can say, okay, let's delete this one. We can say, okay, for progress, we actually have, sometimes we have a task that is in progress, but there's also like the waiting on option where we started it is in progress, right? But right now we can't work on it because we're waiting on someone. Or also another one for the in progress one would be review pending, right? So if you want with this way, it gives you this like double selection of having a first high level to do in progress complete and then something below. The one drawback with this one right now is that there's no way to change the labels here, right? So if you can't start organizing labels in the selects or multi-selects like that. So you're stuck with these, which means it's nice for like a task or project, but not as useful elsewhere. And one last cool thing that you can do with this is that you can choose how to show it. So it can be shown as a select, but it can also be shown as a checkbox. And the fun thing about a checkbox is that if I click now here on checkbox and I go back to edit it and show it as a select, it has all automatically flipped to done. Now, that might not seem too useful right now, but if we talk later about linked views and different ways of viewing your database, this is pretty cool because you could in one view see the status one, in another one where you just want to quickly tick something off, you could have a checkbox. But again, we'll talk about that in a second. So I have our status here now, and the next property to look at would be a date. That's fairly easy, so let's have our due date. That's nothing else than the usual calendar picker. So if we click in it now, we see, okay, we can pick pretty much any date. We can say, okay, this is due a week from now. We can choose to remind us. So if we do that and the date occurs, then Notion will give us up here in the update section this quick like notification bell that something we want to be reminded of this. We can actually, instead of picking just a date, we could pick a date range. So if we toggle on end date, now we have the option to say, okay, that's probably not for like a due date, right? But if you have like, would build a calendar and you would want to have an event that spans several days, you could do it like that. And you could even include the exact time if you wanted to. Also, two quick tips, you can format the date, the time zone and the date. So you can say, okay, I want to see the full date or something else. I want to have the 12-hour, 24-hour, and I can change the time zone. And one last thing, if you want to start your week on a Monday or on a Sunday and don't know how to do that, it's by going to settings and members, to your language and region, and then to toggle on start week on Monday on or off, and that will determine whether this calendar that you pull up shows you a Monday first or a Sunday first. Great. So now you already start to see what's so cool about Notion databases, because unlike a spreadsheet that just gives you basically one type of cell and then you can change it whether it's a number or not, you have here a lot more options. So of course, the due date, we could have written it in here, right? We could have said, okay, this is due on August 30th, something like that. Or we could write for the status to do. But if we do the status like this, right, that means then every time we change it to something else, we would need to, okay, go in, no, this is done. This is a lot more effort than just going on here and saying, okay, now it's done. Same for the due date. If you, of course, it can be nice to just type it in, but it's a lot more flexible if you have your calendar picker, and it will also enable you to do calculations based on that. So if you ever were frustrated with Excel or Google Sheets because it for whatever reason didn't recognize that something was a date or not, with Notion it's much easier. Cool. Quickly looking at some of the other properties, they are all fairly simple. With person, what you can do is if you have several people in your workspace, this will bring up an option to select the different people. So here I don't think I have anyone in here, not just myself. So if you have other people in there, you could use this to assign it to someone, right? So like for task manager, who's responsible for this? Unfortunately, I am responsible for all of them. Quick tip here, if you need to add like an information to several database fields, you don't have to click now in here and say Matthias for everyone. The two things that you can do to speed this up is to either select all entries, right click, and go on edit property, responsible, and then click on Matthias, and it will fill everything out. Or the other way to do this, maybe let's do this for here. If we say, okay, do it, and we want to have, we can either like, again, do the same method, or we can copy it, and then we can simply mark all the other fields and paste it in there, and it will be in there. And you will realize there are two ways to have a cell selected, right? You have this where you're inside, and then you have this other option where you're slightly outside. And the most reliable way, like when you click on it, you will always be in it. But if you press escape, you get this selection. Now you can copy the whole cell, and like you can just use the arrow keys on your keyboard to navigate to something else and paste it over there. Okay, moving on. You have files and media. This one simply allows you to upload something. So if I now click in it, it will open the option to either embed a link or to browse my laptop and upload a file for up to 5 Mbits on a personal plan, or like on the free plan, or if you upgrade, you can get more. So that's super nice to store data, like actual files, right in a database. So let's call this files. Same goes for images. Then the next one, we want to use the checkbox. Checkbox is the coolest one. So if you don't need like a complex status one, for example, in your planner, then you could just use a checkbox to indicate is something done or not, and all you need to do is to click it or not click it. So checkbox without anything else doesn't do much else, but it's a super useful, quick property to have. Next up, we have our URL. So let's call this link. And here, it just allows you to paste in a link. But the cool thing is that once you have it in, it becomes a bit more clickable than text one. So it's like very similar to this one, but it just like adds a little bit of, how could you say it, like it's a bit smoother to use it. So if we just say, okay, let's take my website, you can just click on it and it will open up if you there's the browser if you had a browser, and it will directly jump in there. Oops, let's go back to this. Okay, then next up we have our email. An email field, again, similar to a text one, but it's already pre-formatted as an email. So if I now say, okay, hello @matthias.de, if you click on this, it will automatically open up the option to send an email. So again, just a bit quicker, will open up your email program. And then last but not least, among the easy properties is your phone number, a phone number. And that one, again, gives you the option to put something in formatted already as a phone number and then call directly from this tool. Okay, so that were all the normal properties. And from the advanced ones, let's just look at a few quickly. The easy ones, you have created time, created by, last edited time, and last edited by. And all four of these properties will be automatically filled. So if I pick last edited time, you see it gives me the last time I basically touched that record. So if I say, okay, due date here is tomorrow, you see, okay, it switched to our current time. Same for the other ones. So we have the created by will all be me. We have the created time, which will all be the time when they were created. So if I create now a new entry, oops, new entry, let's go back here, we see it is as well the current time. Oops, it's actually at the top here. Okay, so these will be automatically generated, and the cool thing is you don't need to add them to your database in order to have them. So if you are worried that you might need the created time later for whatever reason, don't bother adding it in the beginning, add it whenever you need it, because as you can see, I didn't have them from the beginning and it still filled them out properly. So let's delete them because we don't need to actually look at them. But with that, we've covered all the different sorts of properties in your database. And again, think of all of them as adding additional information to the main item, in this case, our task that we need to do. There are three more properties that we'll look at in a later part: relations, rollups, and in a separate video then formulas. But with this, you have all the basic knowledge to start building your first database. But there are a few more things to know about them. So first, let's talk about layout of your actual database. So this is the table view, right? We chose that in the very beginning, so it looks exactly like a table. And we have our different columns here. We can resize them as we want. There's like a limited, like a minimum width for them, for like all of them except for the checkbox. And for the new one with the bar, you can actually make that smaller if you remove the number and show a ring, then you can also get that to very, very small. But there's no way to get the other ones smaller. One quick hack, if for whatever reason you want to get this smaller than it's possible, is to just turn it quickly into a checkbox. So let's turn this from a text into a checkbox for a moment. Resize it to, very small, and then go back to the text. And as you can see, we have now a very small text property. And you see something else, it wrapped the text. By default, your database will wrap text, so if something spills over in the next line, it will expand things here. You might want that, you might want to be able to read everything, but maybe you also don't want that. Maybe you want like a look where it just disappears. You can do that by clicking on a property and then toggle off the wrap. So if this is toggled off and I resize it now, you see the additional things, they just disappear from the view. So that usually makes for a cleaner view, because that way everything here has the same height and you don't have to struggle with that, because unlike with Excel or so, there's no way to change the height of the columns manually. So that's one trick. Another thing is that if you have some properties that you don't need to see, you can simply hide them. So if I click on, say, okay, like a phone number, I don't really need to see it usually, I can click on hide in view and now it disappears. Oops. But information is still there. That's the cool thing about a database. It doesn't matter so much what you see here on the view. What matters is what is really set up. So there are two ways to see that. First, if you remember from a previous video, every entry in our database is actually its own Notion page. So we can click on File Our Taxes, and now we see, okay, we have a full page here, and we could, in here in theory, like have our heading, something, and we could have, we can actually have checkboxes inside this, right? We could say, okay, like file our taxes, what does this actually contain? I need to gather all my papers, I need to gather my receipts, I need to call my accountant, and so on and so on. And it all lives inside that page that lives inside a database with all the additional information. And you can see, if you have a page that lives inside a database, you will get all the properties of the database at the top together with the information. You can change it here. So I can say here, file our taxes, actually that's professional. And you see, it changes here. And also you see that the phone number, even though we hid it in the main view, it's still there. So I could hide all of these properties, right? I could hide them all from here, hide this, and even though I don't see it here anymore, I have like now less visual clutter, all the information is still associated with our key information with file our taxes. So that's one way to design or like to create cleaner layouts for your database. Very closely related with that concept is the concept of views. So let's say, for example, you have one view for your task where all you really want is the status property, just like all you really want to see is the due date. You could now hide all of them manually here. Alternatively, you can click on the three dots, go on properties, and here you see also all the properties that are associated, the hidden ones and the ones that are shown, and you can just click on hide all. Now they all disappear, and now we just toggle on whatever we want to see, and now we have a much cleaner looking table. Now, what if there are like different ways of how you want to see your information, right? Maybe sometimes you want to see the due dates, sometimes you don't want to see them. You could obviously every time go in and say, okay, actually show me who's responsible for this. Okay, that one is responsible, and then let's hide it again and go back. That's very cumbersome though, and you don't need to do it. Instead, you can simply create a different view. A view is basically a way of looking at all the records in your data. It doesn't influence the sort of data that's in there, but you just display it in a different way. And to create another view, we can simply click on the plus button next to table. And what we'll do is it will ask us to name our view. So let's name this maybe just difficulty. That's the only thing we want to see on here. We can pick from all the database types. We're going to go over them in a second. And then we have a few other layout options like showing the database title. Say, turn this on or off for a much cleaner look. Again, we can have a global wrap. So this is what we were doing before on a per column basis. We can just also do it like globally and say, okay, in general, wrap everything, or in general, wrap nothing. And you can pick how you want to have your pages opened. So you can say, remember when I was clicking on that page and opened in a side peek? That's that option. You can also open it in a center peek or as a full page, but usually side peek is nice. Okay, done. Now we have our second view here, and I can just switch between these two views, and they have the exact same entries, but I can style both views differently. So for this one, I could decide to, let's go back here, properties, hide all, only show difficulty. Of course, that's now not a very useful view, but you get the gist of it. You can have like different ways of seeing these things. By the way, also here, you could also hide the database name here if we wanted to, either by clicking on the three dots, going on layout, and then you get the same options as if you set it up, right? Oops, toggle it on, toggle it off. Or alternatively, you can click on the three dots here and click on hide database title. So this is how views work, and you can create an unlimited amount of views. And if you change something in a view, it changes in the complete database. So if I say now here, okay, new entry, wait, this was a different task. That task was to get groceries, and it's a difficulty of 1. That change obviously carries over to all other views because you modify the core record. So when working with different views in databases, you always need to distinguish two things. Are you working with the values and the associated data? So this is the main value, right? And these are all the associated data points. If you do a change in any view, it will apply to every view. Or are you just changing the way you look at the data? So this is like something like resizing the columns, right? Wrapping something, hiding certain parts or so. That only applies to a specific view and not to the underlying set of data. But that wasn't a very useful view to build, right? Like, I mean, we also were seeing that here. That was just like to show you that you can quickly have different views for different subsets of information. But what's really cool about views are the different ways of how you can display data in terms of this. Notion has by default 6 types of, 6 ways of viewing your data. We already know the table. That one's the most obvious one. And the next most obvious one and easiest one is the list. So we're actually going to jump to that one for a second. So let's name this list view, and we click on the list option. And 2 things happen. First, you see that the data is now displayed in a different way, and we have different options. For the list view, you have the least options because it's the simplest one. You basically can only choose to hide or show the database title. And you see the list view is very clean. So if we hide the database title and this, we have like this very, very minimal look. Also, this is a great one if you have like limited space available, right? Like with the database, like the table looks very cluttered because you get then this annoying scroll bar. But with the list, you have this very nice minimal look. And you see that you have your main entry here, and then you have something on the side. So here on the side is where the properties are actually displayed. And by default, once you switch to a list view, it will only show you one property, but you could toggle on as many or as few as you want. So for the cleanest look, just hide everything, right? Just see the entries. But we could also now say, okay, actually, I want to see whether it's done. I want the checkbox. Let's click out of this again. And I can interact with that, right? I can just say, okay, call that's done. And I can add also several ones. So I want to see the due date. I want to see the area, these things together. The only thing, if you add too many things, it can start looking a bit cluttered, and you need to be careful in what order, because now this is not a very nice look, right, with the checkboxes. So what we want to do is we want to change the way in which they appear. So we can drag this down and say, okay, done as the last one, then area probably, then due date and then area, because that way the dates should always be, no, this one doesn't have a date. So you see there, you start running into problems, in particular if it's not filled out for everything. So let's hide them and just have it like this, again, for a cleaner look. That way of rearranging properties also works, by the way, in a table. So you can always just drag columns somewhere else, but you can also just click on the 3 dots, go on the properties, and then reorder them like this. So get the email to the front or something like that. Okay, so that was the list view. Let's flip that back to full width. Again, by far the simplest one. Next, board view. If you like Trello or Kanban boards, then you're gonna love this. So let's call this board and let's click on here. And as you can see, you basically get a full Kanban board. So everything that you can do in Trello, Notion just can do as well in this one view. And you see we have a few more options here now. So first thing is we can pick a card preview. By default, you only have your the name of the item, but you could say, okay, actually, please show me the page content. Remember, everything is a page, so these pages are empty, so there's nothing to show, but for this one that has something, we can actually take a peek inside and see what's there. We could also see the page cover. So for this one, we could say, okay, if we have a cover on a page, so for example, column has no cover right now, but we could say, okay, add a cover, change the cover, or let's not change it for now, but then you see now all of a sudden you have the cover displayed, and it's a nice way to to get some visuals into your database. Let's go back to layout. Next option would be, last option would be to pick the files. And for files, what you can do, remember, we had here something attached. So if you have a link to an image, you can embed it here, and then you can display it also in the bot view. That's this. Now all that's left is you can color columns. Or first, you can, sorry, you can change the size, right? You could have them large or small. If you have an image for it, so let's go back to the page cover. If you have an image attached, you could say, I want to see the complete image, right? Not useful here, but for example, if this was a people database and you had like headshots and you don't want the headshot to like be all weirdly zoomed, you can click on fit image. You can pick, okay, what is actually the grouping, right? Here it's now personal and professional, but probably for a Kanban board, what we'd rather have is the status, right? So we click on the group, we click on this one, and we pick instead our status here. And now we get our different lists here. We can, if we are in the grouping options, we can also say, okay, please sort them by like either by name or like manual. I want to have like manual options, but I want to have like for whatever reason in progress at the front, or like I want to have to do in the front. You can do that through that option. You can hide empty columns if you don't want to see the things that have nothing, and which is a nice option that's both available here and on the main one on here, is you can color the columns to get again a bit more visual elements on your page. So that's the board view in Notion, and it's pretty awesome because now you can drag and drop things in between elements and it will automatically assign the new tag. So file our taxes was done before, now it's in progress. If we go back to our table, need to, I rearranged these a bit. So file our taxes is now in progress. If I flip it here back to do and go to the board view, it will be now as to do. So that's just a really cool way because it's the same underlying type of data, but displayed to you in a different way. Moving on, the next view. After the board, let's take a quick look at the calendar view. That one is also pretty self-explanatory. Let's name it calendar. As you can see in the options, we now have the opportunity to pick which date we want to show our calendar by. So as of now, we only have one date property, right? But let's just click on done here for a second. If we were to say, okay, we have a due date, and I don't know, maybe we have also a DO date. So like one is a deadline, one is our internal planning when we plan to do it. We could now, let's just put this here, all of them. We want to do all of them today and then like 2 tasks tomorrow. Great. If we now switch to our calendar, we can go back here to the 3 dots and then on layout. And we can see now that we can flip between the 2 types of the dates. So unfortunately, there's as of now no option to tell Notion to show me all applicable dates. So you need to pick one. So we could either now display the due date and then we see our tasks here, or we could show it by due date. And the cool thing is, again, remember, this is the same sort of data that you have in your table. So if I now change my write a paper from the 24th to September 1st, I can just drag and drop it here. Now if I go back to the table, where was it? Write a paper, September 1st. It updates here as well. And I can of course say, okay, maybe I need to see actually some other things here. So I can go, oops, sorry for that, was a bit quick. I can click on the 3 dots for the options, go on properties. Don't know why it gives me that double click here right now, but then I have all my properties here and I can say, okay, please show me maybe the done checkbox. So now I could right from here click on the done checkbox if I wanted to. Should be able to, yeah. If I hit the checkbox and not the whole entry. So I can tick them off on here, or I could say, please show me also the comments that I've wrote, or give me the person who's responsible, and so on and so on. And as usual, I can reorder them by dragging and dropping them around here. So that's the calendar view. As of now, there's unfortunately no way to have a different set than the month view. If you want to get a week view in Notion, I'll leave a link in the description below and I'll explain you the workaround to do that. Closely related to the calendar is the timeline view. This one is great if you're planning projects in Notion. So as you see, once we go on there, we have again the option to, okay, what is our timeline? Which date should it grab for that? And because in the timeline we have the option, right, to we have a start and end date for sure, we can tell it, well, it's actually separate start and end dates. So then that way we can have the start and end date in different fields. So if this would be now, instead of the due date, a start date, right, we could say, okay, from start date till the end date. We can also decide to show the table on the side that will pull all the options that we have here on the side, and now we can see, okay, our get groceries, we have it planned here, but we can also hide that. If we have the table on, by the way, we can select then again, okay, in our database here on the side, do we want to see the area or not? Oops. Now I think we put too many on. Let's hide them all again. And so we want to see the table, but we only want to see a single entry. Now it works properly. And as always, we can move things around here, right? So we can say, okay, get groceries that actually started on the 15th of August, and it will take me half a month to get groceries, and it will update the entries elsewhere. Also, just because I forgot to mention it on the calendar, of course, you could also say, okay, this actually takes 2 days, and now you will have a start and end date, or if you already put it in for longer, that works as well. So you can simply, by dragging and dropping, change the date properties. And also, of course, here, go and see which other properties you want to show. In this case, here on the timeline part. So you can set the table part here separate from this area. So I can turn the area on, I can turn the checkbox on. The only issue with this one is that whenever the text is too long for the duration, it will give you like this sort of weird look that it's not all too pretty. Also with the timeline, you get the option to have a lot of different views, so you could even break it down by the hour, or like zoom out very much and do it by the year. So like painting our room, that's a project that will take until mid-November, something like that. So a lot more flexibility than the calendar one. But Notion just recently bought a calendar company, so there's hope that the calendar will get better too. And now we're nearly done with our views. All that's left is the gallery view. And gallery, pretty much like it says, is a bigger picture of your entries in this neat little card view. So just like in the board view, we can pick whether we want to have a card preview. By default, it will give you the page content. We could again flip to the page covers. That should give us that one image that we added there. Yep. Or we can go to none, and then it looks very similar to the board view, just with the exception that you don't have the columns that sorts it. This is a particularly great view if you want to have a rather minimal look of your entries. We can also, like right now, the size of them is medium, right? But we can say, okay, actually, let's make them small, and this can be like a really nice and clean minimal look, in particular for projects or something like that, to use in your database. Awesome. So those are all the views in Notion. Again, just quickly run through. We have our table where this is the best view to edit things and to add properties. I would always recommend to start out by that, and then to use the other views to like visualize the data, right? You have your list. Here's the list for the minimal view. You have a board view for like this Kanban style like planning and to drag and drop things around as you like. You have a calendar to visualize dates. You have a timeline to visualize entries that will drag on for several days, months, or weeks. Then we have a table again for whatever reason, and you have your gallery at the very end. This is particularly great if you add images to it, right? And you get like a really nice visual board. You could like sort of build Pinterest in Notion with this. Okay, moving on. Let's go back to our table and look at two options that are very prominently featured up here, but that we haven't checked out yet. Filters and sorts. They are awesome. Sort is fairly simple. It lets you sort, who would have guessed it, your database according to the properties. So we could say, please, right now, right, we can just move entries freely around. There's like no real sort in there. It's just like whatever order we put them in. But in particular for like our task list, right, we might want to see them in the order in which we have to do them. So we can go to sort, and then we can pick the due date, and then we can say, okay, please sort either ascending, so then that's the newest date or like the next date at the top, or descending, then the oldest one is at the top. So for due dates, it probably makes sense to see like the next task that you need to do next at the very top. and now you have them automatically sorted. Note that if you now try to drag something around, it will give you this warning, would you like to remove sorting? Because having it at that point obviously is not true to the due date that's assigned. You can also have several sorts. So for example, let's say we have several tasks due on, that's August 25th, and without a time. Let's remove that time, Zack. So we have two at the same time, then you can like add like a secondary sort. So we can say, okay, and if that is the same, please do an alphabetical sort, right? So call mom is still here, but if like file our taxes would be now file our taxes, you see it jumps to the top because we have a secondary alphabetical sort. But the fact that this one here starts with 2 A's doesn't change anything because the primary sort, the due date will apply first. So that's pretty much all you need to know about sorting. Next, filters. Filters are super powerful, and they are what will turn your databases into real workhorses. So let's just pretend we are building a task manager. It's a really chaotic task manager here. If you need a better one, a cleaner one, check out the description. I have a template for you. But let's just pretend this is our task manager. Well, if we want to manage our tasks, we probably don't want to see things that we've already done, right? And we can use a filter to achieve that. So we click on filter and, oops, need to click again. And now we have two options. First, we can just like click on anything to create what is called a simple filter in Notion, or we can click on the advanced filter below to add a more advanced filter. And they're pretty much the same, they work the same way, but the interface looks slightly different. So I'm first going to show you the simple filter. So let's look for the due date, also like add the checkbox or done checkbox. And now you see I get here this thing, okay, done. Then I have an operator here. If I click on there, I get like the other operators. For a checkbox, it's either yes or no, so there are no other options. And then I can say checked or unchecked. So this is the way it looks for a simple filter. I usually prefer advanced filter look. Again, it's not more complicated, it's just a different way of looking at it, and you have more options there. So I usually click on either directly on add advanced filter, or if you create a simple filter, you can click on the three dots and then add to advanced filter. And I just like this layout a little bit more. Because then at the very top you have the property that you want to filter by. Then you have the operators that are available, and then you can put the value. And so let's do, okay, done is unchecked. And that will remove everything from our database that is checked. So if I now say, I got groceries, it disappears. But remember, this just applies to, this is just a rule that we apply to this view. So the database still contains that record. So if we go to that second table that we very usefully created, we still see that get our groceries, it's still on the list. It's just done, so it won't show here. So we could do the reverse filter here, right? We could say, okay, here, please show me all the tasks that I've done. Oops, my mouse is acting up a bit. So let's go to done and say checked. And as you can see, with the simple filter, it works just the same. And now we could say, let's rename this view to done tasks. And let's rename this view to open tasks. And we have a very simple task manager, and if we check something here, it will appear in the other one and the other way around. So if we say, well, groceries, we actually didn't get them, oops, they jump back to this view. And with filters, let's go back to our advanced filter. You can also create more complex ones. So I can add another filter rule. And the first thing that I can do is I can decide whether I want it to be an and or an or filter. And filters mean that both conditions need to be true for it to appear in here. So let's say I only want to see tasks that I still need to do and that are assigned to me, right? So I would say, okay, let's go to responsible. And now you see we have also different operators. The operators available will depend on the property that you select. So for example, in the text field, you will have is not, contains, does not contain, starts with, ends with, is empty, or is not empty. In a number property, you will get also the operators for mathematical expressions, or like empty or not empty, and so on and so on. So play around with it for due date. For example, you can pick a custom date. You can say is in the next week. So we could also say, okay, please only show me the tasks that I need to, that are due within the next week. So now the list only shows stuff that I need to do within the next week. And I can, again, like add another additional condition that has to be true as well. So I can say, and I am the person that has to do it. Awesome. Quick little tip, if you work in teams and build dashboards, me is a super useful filter. If you pick me as the filter, then it's a dynamic one. So whoever in your team workspace looks at this page will see the tasks that are assigned to that person. So then you don't need to build like 10 dashboards and in one it says, okay, those are the tasks assigned to person A, then person B, person C. Instead, just use me and whoever will look at the database will see the correct tasks for them. So this is one type of filters. Let's remove this one for now. The other type is the OR filter. OR means that it will show if either of the conditions are met. So we could say, okay, please show me something. Maybe if we're done, it's not so useful. Let's do the due date. So due and due date. So I want to see everything that I want to do or that I have to do within the next week. So I say is within the next week. So now it will show me everything where either the due date or the due date falls within that category. And of course, you can start to combine filters. How? Well, if you see now, if I add another one, they are always also OR, because if I start having like an OR filter here, logically you can't say, okay, and this one has to be the case, because then you have a conflict. So in order to solve that, you need to create what is called a filter group. You can do that by clicking on the three dots here and say turn into group. Now you can say, okay, the first condition is that either the due date is within the next week or the due date is within the next week. Perfect. And now I can go down here. Let's delete these. And I can say, and it is not done. And that way I can now combine OR filters and AND filters within the same view to create even more complex subsets of data. So as you see, it's now only the things that are checked and not checked and are within the range. So if I say, okay, this one is done on 6th September, it's still here because we said like either due or due date has to fall into it. But if I now say, okay, this is actually also outside the range, it will disappear. And same here, if I click on a checkbox here, it also disappears. And obviously with Command C, you can undo your last changes. So that's how filters work in Notion. They are amazing. With them, you really can do a lot of things, and you can easily always, like if you click on the filter one again, you see the blue thing shows you that this database is filtered, and you can of course always click on here and then remove them, or you can just like create a new unfiltered. There's no filter view, and there you have all your entries back again. Because remember, it's a database, so applying changes to the view doesn't change the underlying data. It's of course different if you delete it, right? If you were to say, okay, well, called my mom, gonna delete the task, now it's gone, and it's gone everywhere. So we see here also, we don't have call mom anymore. I need to press Command C to bring it back because I just removed it completely. Okay. The next feature to visualize your data in a database, and of course like filters and sorts, you can apply them everywhere across all the views. The next one I want to talk about is the group feature. And grouping is really cool because it allows you to create, again, like a visual separation for data that's very useful if you have like a big database. So if I click on group, I can pick any property to group by. In this case, I'm going to group by the area. And now Notion automatically splits the table into different sections. I have now a section for my personal tasks. I have one for professional and for no area, because this one doesn't have anything assigned, but if I assign this quickly to professional, we have nothing in here anymore. And this is great now because we have the same table, right? We have our same properties and everything. They live in one database, but because I flip them into personal and into professional, I get like this slighter, or like this cleaner view, and I have an easier time looking at things. You could also, of course, do this by team members, right? So if you could split out all the tasks by the team members and so on and so on. The cool thing is that this is sort of a bit like the board view, right? In the board view, we already grouped them. If you remember, in the layout of the board view, we also picked a group by property. So here we said group them by status. So I could also, of course, do this here. I could say, okay, 3 dots, group, don't group them by area, please group them by status. And then I would get also, it's not a Kanban board, right, because it's not horizontally, it's vertically, but I have a similar result of them broken down in the different status. Now, in the board view, that's the only view where it works, but in the board view, you can apply 2 grouping features at the same time. We already have this main grouping, and if we click on the 3 dots we see here, that's the only one where we have the subgroup feature. So I can click on here and say, okay, and area. So now I get it broken down by the progress, like so my rows, and here, by the columns, and in my rows I have personal, professional, and I can say, okay, file our taxes. That's done, but wait, actually it's professional done. And again, remember, like moving it around here will apply different tags. So now painting our room is in progress and professional. So pretty cool, again, to visualize your data and create like a better view of the underlying set. That was pretty, that was a lot, right? But it's getting even better. Now, before we move on to one of my favorite things that we can do with databases, let me just like quickly remove the grouping here so that it's a bit clearer. So we just say remove grouping. One quick thing that you can do with databases as well, and that's called a database template. So you will notice if I click here on the new button on this arrow next to it, it says templates for our database. We can replicate a sort of page several times. If you remember from the video on the page, you remember that there's something called a template button in Notion. So we can go here, we can type template, and then we can say, okay, every time I hit this new to-do button, please give me the timestamp of today, and then give me like some lazy checkboxes, right? And then I can close this, and now I can click on it, and it will create it every time. And I can put all things in here that I want, right? I could like put headings in here, like heading 1, something big. I could put questions in here. I could like, I can like have a ton of stuff in here. And every time you hit a button, it will create the same thing for you. So it's a great way to create a lot of things quickly. You see like, lots of stuff here now. You have something similar in a database, but even more powerful. So when I create a new entry here, right, it's just like empty. I have can write something, and then I can click on it, and it's like an empty page. Oops, sorry. That's an empty page. Let's delete this one. I keep clicking into it. But maybe we want to pre-fill things. Maybe we want to say, okay, if I create something, it would be cool if I could say, okay, this is a professional task, this is a personal task, or maybe for my tasks, I always want to have something written inside. And we can do that with a database template. So I click on this arrow and I say new template. And now I do basically the same thing I do with this template button, but for the database. So I can say, okay, new personal task. So this is like naming your template. And I can now pre-fill all the properties, or like the ones that I want to. So I can say, okay, well, this has to be the personal area. I also want to add an icon, right? So I want to add an emoji, maybe my personal tasks, I want the fire emoji. And none of these I can set like for all of them, so that's fine. But maybe I want to add whenever there's a personal task, I want to add some context here. So for example, let's do what do I need to do? Why do I want to do this? And what would happen if I don't do this? Maybe I want to like answer all these questions whenever I create a new personal task. So now I click out of it. And now if I go on new and just write like task and I open it, I have the option to apply a template. So if I click on here, what it will do, it will load everything that's predefined in the template in here. So I click on it, and as you can see, it applies the tag, it applies the emoji, and it loads in these questions. And that can be everything, right? You could have like a full book in theory in the template and would load it always inside. Oops, sorry for that. You can also, let's maybe just clean everything up here so that we don't get confused. You can do the same by just clicking on the button here and then clicking on new personal task. Then you directly have it, applied and don't need to apply it separately. So another task. And the last way of how you can apply it is if you click on here and you click, you see here default. You can change the default to any template in the workspace, and that means that whenever you create a new entry in that database, it will automatically apply. So now if I click on here, you can see that third task, it will automatically get the emoji and it will automatically fill whatever I pre-filled. And if I click in it, I'll see that I already have the content in here. Now, quick tip, if you apply the wrong template to something, what you can do is you can delete all the page content, and that will give you again the option to apply a template. The only problem is though with this that if you pulling in this template will now only change things down here, and if you have already like tags up here, it won't overwrite them, right? So in theory, new personal task should turn this to personal. If I click on here, you see that doesn't happen, but at least it gives me the content of the page. Great, so templates, super useful to speed up your workflow, to make things quicker, and to pre-populate areas in your database. While we are talking about pre-populating, one more trick. Remember, we had set up filters before for our done one, for example. And it won't show anything in here that doesn't have the checkbox done. Now, you can use filters also to pre-populate entries. And that works like this. If you set a filter and you add a new row to a database, Notion will make sure, if possible, that that new row fulfills the condition. So if I click now on here, you will see that automatically that checkbox is checked. So another, done task. And you can add on this, right? Like if I said, okay, my filter here would be, let's add this to an advanced filter, so we can do some more things. Done is checked. And I want them to only show, and let's take area is, now I can select the tag, area as professional, so I only want to show professional tasks. If I now enter something new, you will see that like it is checked here and has the professional tag, even though it's trying to apply the personal template, but this one overwrites the other settings, so we get like in the end something with a professional tag. But using the filters to pre-fill entries is really a helpful way to make sure that you don't need to type out the same things over and over again. We're going to talk later about how you can exactly use it in your workspace. Just remember it already as a neat little feature. Now we get to one of my favorite Notion features of all time that will make all of this much, much better. I mean, databases are cool, but they wouldn't be nearly as cool without the next feature, and that's called linked database. We already talked about that concept that information in our database, once we store it in there, right, it's like a big box. It's like a big shelf where you can put all sort of information in there, and then you have like different ways of looking into the box or like at the shelf through the different views. But so far, we always had that box standing in the same place and we just looked at it from different angles. But it would be really cool if we could have that box in several rooms of our house, right? Right now, this database is only in our normal page, and maybe we need to see our tasks actually somewhere completely different. Maybe we want to see them in our third level page. Now, what a lot of Notion beginners might do is that they might go in here and they say, okay, please, I want to have this as well on the other thing. I will copy it, so I press Command Z, and I go to the other side, and then I will just paste the database in there. And you get like some options at the side, but let's just ignore it. The problem is what you now did, and which is also indicated by this one here that we can remove, you created a copy of the database. Which means if I make any changes to this, so let's say, well, all these tasks are done. Great job. Today was a really productive day. So I'm going to say edit property, done, checked. Awesome. If I now go to the other page and look at it, I see nothing is checked here. Because I created a copy of the database and they happen to be completely independent. So instead of seeing the same box in different rooms, I have now two boxes that behave completely independent. But there's a way around this, and it will make everything so much better. So instead of copying database over there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type / and then linked view of database. And a linked view is really that you basically create a hologram of your initial box in another room, and it will behave and look exactly the same. So I click on it, and then now I need to pick, okay, what database should that be? I think if I recall it correctly, the database that we were working on here the whole time was our database name. Let's see whether it's that one. Yep, perfect. And you see, it looks pretty much, oops, let's take the no filter view. You can have then the second option to bring over a view from the other database. But let's start from scratch with this standard one. And this looks now, again, pretty much like the other one. With a very important difference that if I tick everything off here as done, let's go in here, add a property, everything is done, it will actually reflect in the original one. Because the other one is just, you can really imagine it like a hologram of your first box that stands in a different room. So if you have now, like, your task database in several different places, you can make changes everywhere, and it will always update in the core location. The only problem, or like not the only problem, but one of the issues though is the only reason why you know that this is not the original is this arrow. This shows you that it's a linked database. Here you don't have it, this is the original, and here you have it, this is the linked view. But if you're not like me and prefer like the much cleaner view of hiding the database title, you have no way of knowing which one is the original. And that's, now we circle back to what I said in the first 5 minutes of this video, that's the reason why I would always create the main instance of a database as a full page database, and then only have linked views inline, because otherwise you might actually end up accidentally deleting all your information. Case in point, if I delete this, nothing happens. It's gone here, but I still have the information here, right? Like everything is still here. I can turn it back into inline. But if I now delete it here, it will be gone everywhere. So let's go back here. Let's create again our linked view, pick the database, pick the view. If I now delete the main one, the database is gone. If you're lucky, yeah, in this case, Notion has now added this, like that. If you're lucky, it remains in your trash, so you can get it out of the trash. That's why you still have the linked one here, because it still contains it in the trash, your first database. But at some point, the trash will be emptied, and then this is also gone, and it doesn't exist anymore, and then it just disappears, and all of a sudden you have a big problem in your workspace, and you really don't want that to happen. So I would recommend that, you always, where did it go? you always, let's press Command Z a few times and see where that comes back. Nope. This is our database, no? There it is. Perfect. Found it. This is why I would always recommend to create your databases, the main version of it, as a individual page, and then only use linked views on other pages to pull data into that. Now let's talk a bit more about linked databases and why they are so cool. So one thing, you can now see your tasks all over your workspace, right? You create them once in some place, and then they show in every other area of your workspace, and they sync, and everything is always up to date in real time. You can, however, also use it to create certain capture inboxes. Now, let's say we have this here, and we can obviously apply templates, but we could also say, okay, I want like a way to quickly enter a task. And I could do this by creating a linked view of a database, picking our task database, creating a new view, now creating the most minimal view possible. So I will go to a list, I will hide the database title, I will call this quick capture, done. And now I see all my tasks, but I don't want to see anything. I want to use this just so I can quickly click on a new button and drop in a new task. So I go to filter and I set an impossible filter. An impossible filter is simply something that cannot be true. So I could do something like, okay, the name is empty. So now you see nothing is here, and I can click now on the new button. I can type in a new task, and it will immediately disappear out of the quick capture area, but it is, where is it? Somewhere here, a new task in the main database. And now obviously if it's on the same page, this is not very entertaining, but if we remove this here, and this is maybe, just my start into the day page or so, I have my nice quick capture here for tasks, and I could even like build this further out. I could say, okay, give me 2 columns. Let's have this one in this on this side, and let's give it a quick heading. Let's say, okay, heading 3, new private, no, not new personal task. And let's use the filter trick, because remember, if it's an impossible filter, it doesn't try to fulfill it, right? It won't like remove the name out of it. But if I say an additional filter is now that the area should be personal, it will apply the personal tag to whatever I write in here. Case in point, I click on this and it says personal. This stays now in because the name is actually empty, so I would need to put something in there and then disappears. But you could also create like a truly impossible filter if you said instead, okay, let's delete this one, let's add instead, let's good use case for another property. Let's add our created time property. There it is at the bottom. This one will always be filled out. Remember, like it's not possible to have no created time. So if I now create a filter and say, okay, created time has to be empty, nothing ever can show in here. So now I have this, and now I can go on the other column and I can say, okay, new professional task, and I go here and I create another linked view of a database. I take the same database again. We take a new empty view. Oops, we want a list. We don't want to show a database title. Quick capture again. And we set as the filters first. Let's do this as an advanced filter. First thing is that we want the created time is empty. And then we want it to put professional as the is, and then professional. So now if I write something on here, it will be a personal task. Personal, perfect. And if I click on here on the new button, I have a professional task. Awesome. So that way you can use linked databases not just to like show like a specific view or show like your information somewhere. You can also use it to create like these complete apps on top of your Notion workspace. Lots of other opportunities, too many to go through here, but just know this is like how linked views work. And remember, everything that you change here changes back in the main database. So if you delete records here, it will delete it everywhere. So if I go like remove the filter, right? We say, okay, created time, delete that one. If I now select these things and I delete them here, they are also gone from the main one, right? They are also gone here. Okay, that was a lot, but I promise you we are nearly done. There are actually just 2 more topics I want to talk to you about, and then you're officially an expert when it comes to Notion databases. You know everything you'll ever need to know. And those 2 things I want to talk about are relations and rollups. The two of the 3 last properties that we haven't talked about. The third one, that's formulas. That will be something for a different video, but let's focus now on relations and rollups. 2 properties that probably give people the most problems. But don't worry, I have a super easy way to explain it to you, and I'm pretty sure after that you understand it and you can use it for your workspace, and you know how incredibly powerful they can be for everything you want to build in Notion. But in order to do that, we need to quickly revisit this concept of databases again. So remember, in our database, we have our first entry, and that's the key information. By the way, I haven't told you about that, but while you can rename the first row of the database, there's no way to turn it into something else than a title. Every database needs to have exactly 1 title row. You can't do much with it. You can move it around and can pretend that something else is the main one, but Notion will always treat this as the main one. This is the main piece of information. And all the other properties to Notion are just additional pieces of information that got assigned to this information piece. So the whole row belongs together, and this is the supportive information for your main point of information. Now, there might be situations where you want to add information to your main row that needs itself clarification. What do I mean by that? So if we have, sorry for that, the example of get groceries, and we say, okay, actually I need to break this down into subtasks. One way to do that would be to just create this text property, right, and just write down, these are my subtasks, this is what I need to do. By the way, you can get these line breaks in a text field by holding down Shift, Enter, and then you get another line. So now we have subtasks for getting groceries. But the problem is that I can't now assign information to these pieces, right? I can't see whether get in the car is done, at least not easily. I could, of course, say not done or put done afterwards, but that would be very cumbersome. It would be much nicer if I could have my subtasks themselves in a database where I can then check something off, assign an area, and so on and so on. And I can, right? I've already added them, I think, below here. No, I haven't added them, so we quickly just add them. So get in the car, drive to the store, and grab stuff. Great. Now I have my tasks, but now I need to somehow connect them to get groceries. And that's exactly what a relation is for. Before we create a relation, let's look at a few more examples, right? So you obviously have tasks and subtasks that you might want to connect. Another example would be if you have a database with people and want to remember, okay, who are their friends, you could do that. You could use it to pair groups of students, right, in groups of 2 and 3 or something like that. You can connect tasks to a project, recipes to ingredients, and so on and so on. Really, any time where you want to connect information in your workspace, you probably will need a relation. Because again, you could do all of these things with something like a multi-select or so, but that would be very, very inefficient and limited. So what you want to do instead is to create a relation. And doing a relation is nothing else than telling Notion, okay, these 2 rows are somehow connected. So whenever you want to connect 2 rows in your Notion workspace, and it can be across databases, whenever you want to make a connection, use a relation. So let's get started. Let's create our relation. Picking it, and the first thing Notion asks us is, okay, relate to which database? And what it actually asks us is, okay, so you want to connect get groceries to some other rows in your workspace. Where do these rows live? And in our case, they live in the same database, right? So easy peasy, we just pick the same database. It's marked by this I, and then we get a few options. The first option is to say limit, no limit, 1 page or no limit. And what this does is we can say, okay, can I pair this row with only 1 other row or with an unlimited number of other rows? So for example, if we go up here again, right, if we want to pair students in groups of 2, we could say limit this relation to only 1 because every person gets only 1 partner. But in the case of our tasks and subtasks, there's not really a reason to say limit this to 1 person, so we're not clicking on that. And then there's separate directions, and the easiest way to understand that is to just show you. So if I don't toggle this on and just say add relation, what I can do now is I can say, okay, get groceries. I can click in here. Now I get all the entries from the database, and I can pick the ones that I want to connect. So get in the car, grab stuff, and drive to the store. Awesome. Also going to wrap this so that it looks a bit better. Perfect. And now I've connected get groceries with these. But you already see the issue, and that is there's no real telling, right, from just looking at this, which one is the main task and which ones are the children tasks. And what's more, maybe grabbing stuff has another bunch of subtasks. So search veggies might be a subtask to grab stuff. So if I go now here and say, okay, get me the veggies, right? Now I have no way of knowing which one is the main task, which one is the children task. So it's not a very good setup for something like this. So actually, where the setup works is if this were now a student, right? So if this is Tom and, get in the car, turns into Tina, then this single way relation works great. I see, okay, Tom's partner, that's Tina, Tina's partner, that's Tom, perfect. So whenever you have connect 2 rows without a hierarchy and just want to point out this belongs to this, then not toggling on the option on the relation board works perfectly fine. But in a situation like this, where you have a hierarchy and want to show one thing is different than the others, you need to do something differently. So let's go back here, create another relation, pick our database again, and this time toggle on separate directions. And what this gives us is it gives us the option to pick the matching term to subtask. So for subtask, the corresponding other one would be probably parent task, and we get a nice little preview of how this is going to look. So we add a relation, And if you don't have any, if you haven't done anything to your database, you will find the second property appearing here, but because we've hidden some of them, actually, we need to go in here to activate it. So let's click on the eye, and now we see we have actually two relations. And the way this works is that if I now say, okay, let's say, write my paper that has a bunch of subtasks. So I click in here, write a paper, and now I can browse and say, okay, what we need to do is we need to do research, I need to call the professor, I need to get feedback, I need to write the outline. These are all the subtasks. It's actually wrap it again. Ooh, and one more thing, if I have something that I haven't created here, don't worry, I can also just say, and another task, and it will just give me the option to create it. So I click on here and you see I've now created this one as a new entry as well. But the cool thing is that I have it broken out now. I see here, subtasks for writing a paper are these, and I see here the parent task for this is that one. And now I can break it out further, right? So if another task has like one more subtask, I can easily add this here. And it's very clear, okay, one more subtask, another task below is like a child to write a paper and has itself one more child, and that is that subtask. So that's how relations basically work. We have the connection, and now it's very easy to say, okay, let's write our paper. We can open up our entry and we can say, okay, we need to do research. Let's look into that. Have we done research? Yep, nice. So we can check it off. And then we can go back to write a paper and we can see, have we called the professor? No, we need to still do this. So this is much more powerful than adding these things as simple text fields. And you can go one step further and connect rows to rows in a different database. So that's why we've created a project one here already. Let's say we want to now map our tasks not just to subtasks, but also to a bigger project. So let's go in here and create a relation that we are going to call tasks. It will be a relation. It will be to a different database this time. So we pick our database name, not projects. And we have again the option to say, show it on the other database or not. So if we don't show it, then we only see the task relation on this one, which wouldn't be too useful in this case because we also want to see in the task database, right, which project does it belong to. So we go in here, we have the option to name it or just keep the standard name, and we add the relation. And again, because we have some properties hidden here, we need to click on the three dots on properties, oops, and then here it is, so that it actually shows up. And now all what you can do is we can start mapping tasks to our project. So we can just say, okay, the new task, the painting the room, call our mom, writing something, that all is part of project A for whatever reason. Awesome. And we can continue doing this and we see it showing up here and it's now connected. So that's what relations are all about. Connecting different rows of data in different databases together so that they start forming that connection and you can easily jump between them. You can make things even better though, and for that we need our rollups. In order to show you how good rollups are exactly, let's get actually our let's get back the difficulty that we had, right? And we could, instead of like calling it difficulty, let's add a property quickly. Let's say maybe this is our progress. Oh no, let's say difficulty, okay. But let's show the number again. And that's one thing. And then the other property that I want to see here again are my due dates. Awesome. Great. And then I want to make sure that everything here is, or like at least these ones are all connected to project A. So I'm going to go to edit property, project, and I'm going to assign them all to project A. Great. Now, rollups. What is a rollup? A rollup is sort of the counterpart to a relation. Whereas a relation tells Notion these two rows belong together, the rollup is what you can use to now get information from the connected row into your main row. That sounds a bit complicated, but it's actually pretty straightforward. So let's look at this. We have our project and we have a bunch of tasks. Now, it's nice that we have the tasks here, right? We can click into them and then we can open them and then we can see, for example, is it done or is it not done? But it would be much, much cooler if we could just see here how many tasks are done, right? And we can do that with a rollup. Because what a rollup does is it looks at the connections And then we can pick any sort of information from the connected row and pull it into this one. Let me show you how. We click on plus and let's say tasks. Oops, we have, okay, number of tasks. So we start with something simple. How many tasks belong to that project, because we don't want to count them here. And we're going to pick the rollup. And for, oops, add property. And for rollup, we always need to define three things. First, we need to define, okay, what relation should it look at? You can't have a rollup without a relation. And that becomes very clear if you look at it from the way that I just tried to explain to you, in that relations connect two rows, and rollups now get information from a connected row. So without a relation, there's no connected row, so there's no need for a rollup. So the first thing to do is always have a relation in place. Now, let's pick our task relation. That's the only one we have here. And then you see we already got it populated. The next thing to pick is the property. What piece of information should the rollup pull from the other row? By default, it takes the name, which is the least useful one, because that one you already see in your relation. So that one absolutely makes no sense. But if we click on here, we see all the properties from our task database, and we could pull all of them in. So what we could do is we could say, okay, please show me the area. Now what it will do is it will go into this one, and wherever, for every entry, it will see is it personal or is it professional, and will simply show you. So now you have, at a glance, can see, okay, how many are personal, how many are professional. You could also say, okay, please show me the done checkbox. And by default, it will, again, see, that's the third option, show you the original, which is okay, but not the most helpful one. Instead, what you want to do is you would always want to check, okay, what are your calculate options for the rollup? How can that information be displayed? And that will change depending on what sort of property you're rolling up. So if I click on here, I see a bunch of options. The first thing is I can count how many items are connected. So if I click on this, I'll see, okay, 7 tasks are connected to this project. And as you can see, I can now also, because it's a number property, I could again pick one of the other layouts. I could ask it, okay, how many of them are checked? How many are unchecked? What percentage is checked? And what percentage is unchecked, right? And now that's really cool. So now, because we can show percent checked, and then we can say, okay, please give me the progress ring, right? And now we have not numbers of tasks, but we have, we have our project progress. Super simple. Because what it does, it looks into the entries, and if it's checked, it counts the percentage checked and displays it as this nice circle. And you see, if I now check off Tom, who belongs to project A, as done, we see that this just increased. So that's a rollup, and it's super powerful. Let me show you a few more examples of what you could do. We could see, maybe we have a separate project for a due date for our project, but maybe we just want to see, okay, when is the last task of the project due? So let's go for last due date. And for that, again, we need to create a rollup. We need to have the task relation. We need to go to our due dates. And then if we see show original, we just get all due dates pulled in. But what we want is we want to click on here and see what are the other options. And we see there's an option to show us the latest date. So we click on here, and now we see, okay, this project, the last task of this project is due in 3 months. We could, of course, show this also in a different way. We could show it on a calendar, but now we have the due date in here. And you can do all these things. You could also do it the other way around, right? You could say, okay, for example, project due date. Let's pick a date property, and let's assign next week, August 31st to this. And now we can say, okay, in our tasks, please remind me when is the whole project due. So we can say here also project due date. And we go to the rollup, because rollups work both ways. As a relation, see, we have now a bunch of relations because we can also pull them in from something else, right? But we need the project one. And what we want to see is we want to see our project due date. And here it's fine to show the original, but you could also say, okay, give me latest date. Then it just displays it a little bit different. But let's stick with the original for now. And now in our task database, we see, okay, when is that project actually due? And I hope you see how powerful relations and rollups can be, because they are what truly brings your workspace alive. I mean, having tables is nice, having a database is nice, but what makes Notion so great is the option to have databases, pages, like pages within databases, and then these connections between pages and entries, and showing your information all across the workspace, pulling information back and forth and shoving it wherever you need it. And that, I think, is super, super cool. That's nearly everything for today. There's one last thing that I actually want to show you, and it's very closely related, so I don't count it as an extra thing, but if you don't know about it yet, this is absolutely awesome. I'm talking about what's called a self-referential filter. So by now you might have guessed that one thing that we could do is we could go in here in our project and we could say, okay, let's create actually a dashboard for our project, right? So let's go in here and let's say, okay, create a linked database and show me my task database. It's this one. And then let's set a filter up here to show me only, oops, not sure what's wrong with my mouse today. Let's create a filter, an advanced filter, and show me everything that is linked to this project. So we go project and we say, okay, in the task database, show me everything that contains project A. And now I have my own small to-do list on this project one. Pretty cool, right? And I can, of course, here now go in and toggle on my done one, for example, and I could say, okay, and we see it here on the side, right? It updates live. So call mom, is it done? It's not done. So I uncheck it here and it unchecks it here. So now we use the linked database plus the relation to create a view into our to-do list on project A. Pretty awesome. But that's not the self-referential part I'm talking about, not yet. Because while this is pretty cool, it would be pretty annoying having to set this up every single time you create a project, right? So you would need to do it for project A, you would need to do it for project B, and so on and so forth, which is a lot of effort. However, what you can do, as you know, is you can create a template. So we can create a template, new project. Let's give it an emoji because why not? I like the globe. And now let's create our linked database here for the tasks. Empty view. I want this to be empty. Let's actually have it as a list, a bit more minimal. Let's not show the database title. Let's call it tasks. Done. Perfect. And for the layout, we only want to see the done checkbox so that we can easily tick things off our list. And now if we go to filter and say, okay, add a filter for project, we could pick a specific project, but we can also pick this template. And what this will do is that if I now close this and apply this template to any entry like that exists or that gets created new, is that it will automatically put the name of the entry into the filter. So that way I can click on here and will automatically filter for these tasks. Next, let's just show you how cool this is. Okay, all of these, let's say edit property, they belong to project B. Click on the plus here, great. Click on project B, it's connected now, 16% progress, so that's pretty cool to know. Click on open, apply a template, and boom, we have our to-do list that just pulls in a second, I thought it would be faster, just pulls in the task that we just assigned to it, all without us having to ever do this again. And I can check things here off, and you see on the left, it checks them off there. Oops, we actually clicked into the task, that's not what we meant to do. But yeah, that's what's called a self-referential filter. It works wherever you have a relation between two databases, and you can basically say, okay, filter that other database to only show entries that are connected to this entry in the database. And it's super cool. Imagine the things that you could do with it. You could, for example, have a recipe and ingredients, right? And on your ingredients list, you click on an ingredient and you see a list of all the recipes that belong, that you could cook with that, and so on and so on. So really, really just an absolute awesome feature to make relations and rollups even more powerful. And with that, you're officially a master when it comes to Notion databases. Congratulations, you've made it to the end of this very long video. Still got some questions? Let me know in the comments and I'll be sure to answer. Also, check out the description for more Notion resources and the other videos in this Notion tutorial on YouTube. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, it would mean a ton to me if you'd give it a like. And as always, if you want to learn more awesome Notion tricks, get regular free Notion templates, and are looking for ways to streamline your workflow, then you definitely should follow this channel. See you in the next one.